This is the Champion Forum podcast with Jeff Hancher, the forum for leaders, champions, and dreamers.
For Navy SEALs, success isn't only a result of relentless training in shooting, skydiving, or combat, though they are certainly experts at those things. The real secret is that they use their innate human capabilities to turn the stress of uncertain and complex situations to their advantage. In more than 2 decades of leading, training, and coaching top performers, Rich Diviney discovered that while most elite individuals and teams are masters of preparation, it's more about how they react when things don't go according to plan that separates the best from all the rest. Today on the show, I'm excited to welcome back retired Navy SEAL commander and performance expert, Rich Diviney. Rich, it's been too long. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Well, thank you, Jeff. It's great to be here. Great to see you again, and excited to have another conversation. Yeah, it's been too long. It doesn't feel like that long, but time really flies, doesn't it? So.
Yeah, because Attributes came out, 2023?
2021.
2021.
Yeah. So
that's
crazy. I was slow on the second book, admittedly. So.
Wow. Yeah. So it's been 4 years.
Yeah.
And you came onto our mastermind. They absolutely loved it. The Attributes book continues to get traction. I feel like that book, which we're going to talk about your new book today, Masters of Uncertainty, but that Mastering Uncertainty, that book, Attributes, man, it speaks to a lot of things. I've had a lot of senior leaders in our mastermind talk about how they've used that book for recruiting purposes.
Yeah.
Which you have assessments and so forth on the Attributes website, which if you're listening and you have not read this book yet, I got to promote it. You got another amazing book coming, but Rich, this book, Attributes, absolute game changer. And the Mastering Uncertainty. Here's what we know about leadership. Here's what we know about entrepreneurship, is that is the flavor of the day, is the uncertainty. But how you're framing it is it can also be the biggest competitive advantage that there is.
Right.
We know this is happening. So I want to hear your perspective, though. I mean, you are the expert. Not only have you done it, you've trained some of the most elite top performers all over the planet. Now we have this Masters of Uncertainty book coming out. What inspired the book? And the evolution kind of in your thinking. I know you're a deep thinker and you put thought into this. Why the book and why now?
Yeah, well, I will say that Masters of Uncertainty is the book that I've always wanted to write. I've actually been thinking about this book for many, many years because I've always been, ever since being part of the SEAL teams and being in that environment, it's always been fascinating to me how we do what we do, because it was never, even when I was in the teams, I never described us. It was never about the shooting or the skydiving or the scuba diving. It was about the fact that we were individuals and teams that could drop into complexity and chaos and begin to perform. And so what it really has been a decade or more of, actually more, because I've been out of the Navy for almost 7 years now, but maybe 2 decades of collecting thoughts and distinctions as to what it takes to become a master of uncertainty, what those are. What happened was it was almost a good fortune in many ways. The Attributes is a part of Masters of Uncertainty, but it's a really big part. And so those who read Masters of Uncertainty will recognize that at least one thing we have to know about ourselves is our attributes. But having done the Attributes book before, I was able to kind of put a lot of work and depth into that piece. So I'm actually cool. It was actually cool that it was a little bit of a unconscious, luck there that allowed us to get the Attributes out first, and now this is the book, almost the prequel or the overarching idea. So very excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, it is something we all face.
Yeah.
And here's what we know: not everybody responds to uncertainty the same way, and it is a differentiator.
Yeah.
You open the book early in the book. You talk about the Bin Laden raid story. Mm-hmm. And I'd like you to talk maybe a little bit more about that, because most of us aren't going to face that kind of situation. How did that mission encapsulate the essence of mastering uncertainty?
Yeah, it's funny because I wanted to use a SEAL example for this, but
That's a good one.
all of our missions are classified, and there's one mission. If there's one mission that's known by most people on the planet, it's that one. So, and
Yes.
that one was a good example because what happened there, as everybody kind of knows who knows anything about the mission, was that the guys were tasked fairly rapidly. There were maybe a few weeks or so before they were looking to go. They did go down and they went to a site where they conducted, I mean, multiple rehearsals. I mean, over and over again, they practiced this thing. They knew exactly what they were going to do. They practiced it down to the steps off the helicopter in terms of what the plan was. And as soon as they hit the target, the plan went out the window because the helicopter crashed, and suddenly they had to modify the plan. And they did. They did it seamlessly. The helicopter pilots modified seamlessly. The guys modified seamlessly. And it kept on because the plan got modified there. It's kind of one of those branch sequel type things. If the branch breaks off early enough, it's going to look totally different as you go down those angles, right? So as they went through the mission, things were just happening that they didn't anticipate happening, or problems were being faced that they didn't anticipate having to solve. So it was a very stark and well-known example of a very well-planned thing going, I wouldn't say off the rails because that indicates negativity, but certainly going sideways or going not as planned quite rapidly. Yet the outcome is also known. The guys got their target and everybody came home uninjured. And so I think it's a testament to the SEALs as a team, and certainly my buddies who did the op. But the idea is that it's not just a SEAL thing; it's a human thing. SEALs are human beings, and these are human things that we can understand and do ourselves. In fact, most of us humans do these things. What I wanted to do is articulate them so that we could actually know what we're doing and practice them and do them more deliberately.
So, do you think? I mean, clearly, not many teams on the planet prepare like the SEALs. That being said, is some of this mastering uncertainty in the preparation? You know, preparation builds confidence. Confidence allows you to pivot when you need to and stay composed.
Yeah.
How much of that is innate and how much of it is learned?
Yeah, there's a difference between preparation and uncertainty. You can't necessarily prepare for uncertainty. That's a little bit of a dichotomy there. But what preparation and planning does for any group or team, certainly SEAL teams, is it allows for you to, as a group, begin to map out some contingencies that may decrease the amount of uncertainty you're likely to face. Okay, so I'm always for planning, and as SEALs, you always plan certain contingencies in every mission. But what you don't do is you don't overplan, and you don't try to anticipate things that may not happen. You just say, okay, what are the 1, 2, or 3 things that might happen? Let's make sure we know what we're going to do if that happens. That takes it out of the uncertain realm and says, okay, if this happens, we know exactly what we're going to do. It opens up your optic for, in fact, what uncertainty is, and that is something just happened and we never thought it was going to happen. It's completely, or something happened and it's completely different than we thought. That now we're in uncertainty. And the way you practice that is you just have to keep going through uncertainty and start figuring out what you're doing in those moments. And what I do in the book is I break what that is down. What are those things you need to do so that when you're in uncertainty, you can actually know the steps and do the steps, and therefore practicing and get better and better at it.
Yeah, and you make a very compelling argument time and time again that uncertainty isn't necessarily something to fear, but to literally embrace, meaning it's an opportunity.
Yeah.
Uncertainty is an opportunity is kind of how you frame it. Can you share how your perspective, like when you think back to your journey, how did your perspective on uncertainty shift throughout your career from, day one in the military until maybe your last assignment?
Yeah, I think for me it was more of a realization that there are different types of uncertainty, and if I break it into 2 types, there's anticipated and unanticipated, right? The unanticipated is stuff that hits all of us every day to some degree. I mean, something happens that we did not plan, we did not see coming, and we have to deal with it. Okay, it can be something benign all the way to something very, very serious. But then there's the planned or anticipated uncertainty, and that's when we deliberately step into an environment that's outside of our comfort zone and in some cases outside of our control. And so And so I think for me, my evolution was a little bit of both. I think somehow, somewhere, and I have to really think through this. Throughout my youth, I was given and afforded the opportunity to, at times, be faced with uncertainty and start figuring out how to step through it. I just started stepping through that. But then I made a distinct choice to go to SEAL training. I made a distinct choice to be a Navy SEAL. And what I did in that moment was I deliberately threw myself outside my comfort zone and into uncertainty. And so, what happened by doing that and by going through the training and making it through the training is all SEALs who go through BUDS and become SEALs and then even and are SEALs, we just hyper develop our ability to do this stuff. You can't make it through SEAL training unless you have at least a semblance of how to do this, unconsciously at least. But you hyper develop it, so you just get very, very good at it. And I think the advantage to this stuff is that you get better at those moments when things hit you that you didn't anticipate. That's one, and you learn how to step through and in some cases thrive. But B, and sometimes even more importantly, you begin to feel confidence in deliberately stepping outside your comfort zone. We know that's where growth is. We know all of our growth as human beings, all of our development, all of our evolution comes from this ability, this conscious choice to step outside of our comfort zone into uncertainty. Knowing these tools and getting very good at that allows you the confidence to do that. And I think this is why Navy SEALs, you can talk to Navy SEALs who have made a career of the SEAL teams, they've gotten out, and they do tons of different things. I mean, there are former SEALs who are security guys, authors. I have a buddy who just opened an ice cream shop, coffee. I mean, entrepreneurs, traders. And it's because they have this confidence that, you know what, I don't know anything about this thing, but I want to try it and I'm going to do it and I know exactly how to do it. I know exactly what I need to do when I'm in that environment. That's the advantage.
So it's not necessarily the thing, it is the innate ability that you acquire over time that helps you plug the formula into almost any dynamic.
It's the formula. That's a great way to put it because you can't, again, it's impossible. It's a contradiction in terms if you try to say I'm going to plan or train for uncertainty. You can't do that. But what you can do is you can train in the formula that you apply in uncertainty. And this book outlines that formula.
Yeah. And clearly I was not a Navy SEAL, but I've taken risks and I've put myself in uncertainty. And, we do see this in the military. I spent time in the military, very different than your career, but I feel like people that run at that level, that embrace uncertainty, that if there's not a healthy flow of it, they create it.
Yeah.
They look for it.
Yeah.
And it's not because they're crazy. It's because they know it's necessary to grow.
That's right.
And so if it's not there, I got to go find it.
Yeah. And I want to I do want to say something because you said you're not a Navy SEAL, which is true. However, what we can't do is I want to take the Navy SEAls off the pedestal for a second.
Sure.
What we can't do is delegitimize uncertainty. Uncertainty for people is the same physiologically, regardless of who you are.
Yeah.
And when it comes to uncertainty, which includes obviously fear and the aspects of it, and autonomic arousal, you can have a group of Navy SEAls in a gunfight with Al Qaeda who are feeling less uncertainty and fear than the 8-year-old you just asked to step in front of the classroom and introduce themselves, right? So the physiology is the same, and so even though the stakes might be lower, right? In one case, the physiology is the same. So there's no devaluing experience here. This is human stuff, and whatever causes that autonomic arousal, you're in uncertainty, and these are the tools you can use.
And that's why I love the book, and I love that you wrote it. Because you're an expert in this. You have lived it out. And it's not just for Navy SEALs. I mean, I'm sure they could benefit from the book. But this is literally applicable to everybody. And I also want to stress that point to the listener of, the problem or the uncertainty or the challenge is the biggest opportunity to differentiate.
Yeah.
Because one thing we're all guaranteed is a problem, is uncertainty, is a challenge. We all got the pandemic when it hit, but not everybody responded to it the same way. Those that responded well, they started lapping everybody.
Yeah.
And that's the opportunity.
So you said something funny, which I want to highlight because you said the book is not just for Navy SEALs. I would say this book is actually not for Navy SEALs at all.
Right.
It's for everybody else. In fact, I've sent the book to a bunch of my Navy SEAL buddies and said, hey, Read this. Tell me what you think. This is what we do, right? This book is about what we do without thinking. So it is for everybody else. But I would say everybody else. There are people other than SEALs who are very good at moving through and in uncertainty. And I think those folks too, what they'll do is they'll read this book and they're like, oh, wait a second. Okay, this is exactly what I do. Now I can put words around it. Now I can articulate it. Once you can do that, it allows you to up your game, but also, very importantly, it allows you to help others. It help you help other people do it as well. And I think that's important too.
Well, that's refreshing to hear, Rich, because I'm happy to report that we have a very low demographic of Navy SEALs that listen to the show. So the listener is like very thankful they don't have to go through BUDS training to master uncertainty, right?
That's right. That's right.
Hey, take me through this. I've been dying to get your feedback on this. Take me through this predictability paradigm.
Yeah.
Why is this problematic for our performance?
Well, it's problematic because we have to recognize, especially in today's society, let's take it back to just humans. Okay, as humans, we thrive and crave. We crave and thrive in certainty. And our brains crave it too. Our brains are constantly trying to understand our environment, and when we don't understand our environment, we get uncomfortable. Our autonomic arousal goes up. We get anxiety. So we're wired to make understanding of our environment. And that's absolutely okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We just have to understand that's going on. But the other thing that's going on, especially in today's society, as we've evolved and thankfully evolved in technology and human services and things like that, we have created a very predictable world. The world that you and I live in, and we could get into the global issues and politics, and we could say, well, there's a lot of unpredictability out there, but our day-to-day life is fairly predictable when you compare it to the day-to-day life of our ancestors way back when.
Sure.
And what that lulls us into is this sense that everything's going to happen as planned. And that's what I call the predictability paradigm, is just this sense that we have that, things will go as planned. And what we have to recognize is that's not true. Uncertainty is inevitable. And the key to it is to learn how to move through it and in some cases thrive in it. So we just have to add that to the equation. Uncertainty is inevitable in our lives, and if we want to really begin to thrive in every aspect and actually increase our confidence. I think true confidence is this ability to know, hey, whatever happens, I'll be fine. I'll just work through it. That's true confidence. So to build our own confidence is to understand that and work inside of that.
Confidence is a superpower.
Yeah.
It truly is. One of my most favorite quotes is from Marcus Garvey. He said, if you lack confidence in self, you're twice defeated in the race of life, but with confidence, you have won even before you begin.
Yeah, yeah.
And the things that you're talking about, when you look at peak performance, whether it's in athletics, whether it's in business, all of this stuff, is that the people that win on the highest levels, they understand uncertainty.
Yeah.
And so this creates a level of composure.
Yes.
When the uncertainty hits, is the confidence of, I've won tests like this before.
Yes.
And so although this is an ideal, I didn't see it coming, I at least know how to manage through it. And you create framework for this. That is, I don't want to say it's easy, but dare I say simple. It's easy to digest.
I would say it's certainly simple, and understandable. And the good news is that once people hear it and read it, they'll if they think about it, they're like, oh, actually, I've done this before. Yeah. Because humans tend to do this stuff. That's how we manage ourselves. What I want to do is show people what they're doing so they can actually, in fact, interrogate previous performance and say, oh, wait a second, I did this and this, and that worked, that didn't. What can I do again? And start applying that method. I will say this though, because when you said kind of understand that uncertainty is where we can be comfortable. I have a friend of mine. He's a guy named Josh Waitzkin. Josh Waitzkin wrote a book called The Art of Learning. He was a chess champion at the age of 16, I think. The movie Searching for Bobby Fischer is about Josh Waitzkin. And he and I have been friends for years, and we used to go to have lunch when he still lived in New York City. But he ended up doing Tai Chi push hands and all that stuff. But he used to say that one of his strategies in chess was that he would sometimes throw the game into chaos. And the reason why he'd do that, even though he had to let go of the outcome, because once you throw it into chaos, you really don't know what's going to happen. But the reason why he would do that is because he knew he was more comfortable in chaos than his opponent. This is the superpower, to be able to, to be able to do that, right? So if you're that comfortable, say, hey, when the you know what hits the fan, I'll just deal with it. That's pretty good.
It's literally creating chaos because you know it's your advantage.
Yes, that's right.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's like why when there's widespread political distress, social injustice, pandemics, there are people that always thrive in those environments. And they're like there were people, I'm going to go old school on us here, Rich, Y2K.
Oh, yeah.
There were people that were like, bring it on. Like, this is the moment I've been waiting for.
It's opportunity, like you said.
Yeah, I got a bunker. I got a stash. I'm going to be like a superpower in my neighborhood because I've been waiting for this moment my whole life.
Right.
But these frameworks, again, simple, maybe not always easy, but one of them, and I don't want to give away all of the book, but could you talk about this DPO framework? Because I absolutely love it. This duration, pathway, and outcome. How does understanding these elements help us navigate the uncertainty that's coming?
Well, what we have to understand is neurologically, our brains in any environment are making sense of that environment based on several factors, but the predominant factors, the primary three, are duration, pathway, outcome. In other words, how long is this going to last? What is my route, in, out, or through? And then what's the outcome? What's the end state here? If we are in absence of one or more of those factors, we find ourselves in anxiety. If we're in absence of one, it's mild, two, it's moderate, and then three, it's severe. So an example would be, let's just take illness, for example, okay? Imagine, you or I get strep throat, okay? Strep throat is a known illness. There's a known antibiotic that you can use. So you have a pathway, that's a known pathway, and you have an outcome. You know you're going to get better. What you don't necessarily have is a duration, because antibiotics work differently for every human being, so you don't know exactly how long it's going to take you to get better. Okay, so you're in absence of one of the three. You have mild uncertainty, mild anxiety. Now imagine we have the flu. Okay, flu is also a known illness. However, there's no real known cure for the flu. We know that most people don't die from the flu, so we know that there's an outcome that we're going to be okay. But we don't know exactly the pathway, and we don't know exactly the duration. So we're absent two of those things. So we have moderate uncertainty, anxiety. Now just let's throw ourselves back in the pandemic, and a virus shows up that no one's heard of before. There's no known cure or vaccine. There are some people are dying from it, others are not, right? So the outcome's uncertain, and we don't know how long this is going to be before we figure this all stuff out. So now we are absent all three, which is exactly why when 2020 hit and all of us were in the early stages of the pandemic, we were all anxious and uncertain. We had anxiety and stress because we were absent all three of those factors. The idea behind DPO, and really the concept in the book is called moving horizons. The idea behind moving horizons is when you're in uncertainty and challenge and stress, the way, and in absence of those three factors, the way you gain control is you pick a horizon and therefore create a DPO, create a duration pathway outcome. So an example of this would be, in SEAL training, you spend hundreds of hours. Every day you're running around with these big damn boats on your head. They're heavy. They're cumbersome. During Hell Week, it's just all the time. Okay, and you get sick of this stuff. I remember it was during Hell Week. It was 3 a.m. or something. We're on the beach running with these boats. We'd been running for hours. We were all miserable. I was definitely miserable. And I remember we were running next to a sand berm, and I said to myself, just randomly, I said, you know what? I'm just going to focus on getting to the end of the sand berm. And what I did, in essence, without knowing it, is I picked a horizon. And in doing so, I created a DPO. I created a duration pathway outcome. Duration was from now until the end of sandberm. Pathway was from here to end of sandberm, and outcome was end of sandberm. And in doing that, I created a system where I was giving myself dopamine through the process, and then when I hit the goal, I got a nice dopamine reward for that as well, which allowed me to come back out, look again, and say, okay, what do I know? What can I control? And pick another horizon. And so the process of moving horizons is simply the process of picking a horizon, in essence, taking control, creating a DPO, and moving to that, and doing it over and over until basically one of three outcomes occurs. Either you move through the uncertainty all together, right? You get through it, Two, you open up the aperture enough so that it's no longer uncertain, because every step, every movement forward sometimes gives you more information. So you open up the aperture, or you accomplish the goal. All right, that's the big objective, whatever that was. But this is the way that we can neurologically do that, and every single human being has actually done this to some degree. We just have to start understanding how and when we do it, and then start managing ourselves and managing our arousal levels so that we can do it in any environment.
This is so fascinating to me because I've never heard it spoken this way. But I'm thinking of the absence of what you're talking about. Somebody, you're having coffee with a client, whatever it might be, and I say, what's the goal? And they're like, we want to beat profit by double digits year over prior. And it's like, wow, like how? Like, what do we, it just seems so far away. And so my job as the executive coach is to say, let's put the double digits on the shelf for a minute. And let's talk about a smaller horizon.
Yes.
And, there's this thing called National Quitters Day, fourth Thursday of January, right?
Yeah.
It's the lack of a DPO.
I've participated before.
I have too. It's the lack of what you're saying. Somebody's like, I want to lose 100 pounds. It's like, no, lose 5. Like, just show up to the gym consistently.
Yeah.
So, man, I absolutely love some of the stories too and the analogy, but this gets a micro framework that we literally can use to manage through any uncertainty. Again, I wasn't in BUD/S training, but I went to basic training in Fort Jackson.
Yep.
And I'm reflecting back on this. Like, I had never been a part of anything like this, and I knew muscle failure was coming. That was the goal. But I didn't focus on the pain of that. I just focused on the next 10 sets of push-ups,
That's
whatever
right.
it might be.
That's right.
Man,
Well,
I
and
love
so
it.
it's funny you should say that. Every time I speak to a veteran, regardless of the service, right, they always, without fail, resonate with both books. They resonate with the attributes, and they resonate with this book, because all it is, military training is this stuff. It's just this stuff articulated. That's what my books articulate what's going on. Every part of boot camp, whatever boot camp you go to, is this. It's an attribute selection course. That's what it is. And then B, it's having to learn how to shift horizons and DPO your way through shit, because that's how you get through combat. And that's the training that's going, the quote training that's going on. And it's an unconscious genius level of training that the military has produced over the years.
Well, that's why I love your content so much, because if you're not doing this, it's so easy for the light bulb to go off and implement it.
Yeah.
I love it. Like, and you do, simplify it enough that literally anybody can execute. Like, I'm listening to you talk after following your content for years now, and I'm like, boom, light bulb.
Yeah.
It just goes off again. Talk to us about the difference between peak performance and optimal performance.
Yeah.
What you talk about this, and I'd like you to talk to the listener about why this distinction is so important, especially in uncertainty.
Yeah, the idea is that peak is by definition an apex. There's a lot of people chasing peak, and they want to be peak all the time, but peak is an apex by definition. There's only one place you can go for an apex, and that's downward, right? The other thing about peak is peak often has to be planned for or scheduled or prepared for. So the professional football player plans and schedules his entire week so that he can peak for 3 hours on Sunday, right? We don't get to do that in regular life.
No.
We just don't. We have to perform with what we've got. And so I used to say, Navy SEALs are in fact optimal performers. Optimal performance means I'm going to do the very best in the moment, whatever the best looks like in the moment. And that now, sometimes our best in the moment looks like peak, and it's flow states and everything's clicking, and everything's groovy, and everything's cool. But sometimes our best in the moment is quite literally I am head down, slogging it out, going step by step, because that's all I have right now. And it's dirty, and it's gritty, and it's ugly, and it's hard. That is still performing optimally. And so what we have to recognize is optimal performance is really what we have to seek. And optimal performance, we can think of performance holistically as an umbrella. Optimal performance is this umbrella underneath which peak lives, and gutting it out lives, and even recovery lives. And we have to modulate ourselves in there all the time. And part of this process is we have to be able to perform optimally. The idea that we just have to gut it out all the time to accomplish a goal is BS. Because if we're struggling all the time, we're going to burn out. Okay, if we're not taking time to recover, if we don't have peak moments, what we have to do is modulate that performance throughout the context of a goal. And we do this by understanding how to break these things into chunks and be happy with what we got. Because sometimes those horizons will be a gut it out and get there, and sometimes the horizons will be like, oh, that was cool, that was smooth sailing and awesome, but I think it's that modulation that's the secret.
You just said that for me personally.
Well, it's funny because it resonates with a lot of us because it's quite personal and quite
oh yeah, and it's I don't know, I mean, I hope there's people listening that resonated with, but maybe you're listening and you do feel like me sometimes where you just feel like you're constantly gutting it out.
Yeah.
You hate to lose more than you like to win, which is why I love your perspective on the conversation. Tremendous. I wanted to go back to something that you brought up a few times earlier in the discussion as well. And it's this word dopamine.
Yeah.
And this word has become, dare I say, trendy over the last several years.
Yeah.
But we're hearing about it more than we ever have before. I mean, Tony Robbins talks about it all the time. And, people that are mindset driven, you've talked about it a few times. How does this dopamine actually function in motivation? For people that have just heard the buzzword, but they're like, I just really don't get it. Like, is there a hack? How do we hack this system of dopamine?
No, it's a really interesting. I really introduced the nuances of dopamine through my buddy Andrew Huberman, who obviously has a great podcast now. But he and I met seven or 8 years ago, and we began to study this stuff together. And really what we have to understand, dopamine is not necessarily a reward chemical. It's a motivation chemical. Dopamine tells us this is good, keep doing this, is good, keep doing this. And what they found in studies and animal studies as well is if they suppress dopamine in animals, those animals won't even want to get up to go get food when they're hungry. They will literally sit there and starve to death, right? Because they don't have that. So dopamine is not only gives us juice when we accomplish a goal, it actually gives us juice in the conduct of a goal. It gets us up and moving and keeps us going. Why this matters is because the size of our horizons that we pick matter. If we pick a horizon that's too large, then we will run out of dopamine before we get there. And when we run out of dopamine, that's why we quit. When we say I quit, I give up, that's because we're out of dopamine. We have no more left. So it's too big, you're going to run out. If you don't pick a big enough horizon or a long enough horizon, then you'll get there and it won't be enough to give you a nice sustainable dopamine jolt, right? So you have to modulate, and these horizons are very subjective, and they're very they differentiate depending on the person and often the environment. A lot of times, the more intense the environment, the shorter the horizon. So you gave a great example of just gutting out through push-ups or whatever. I would give the example in SEAL training of freezing in the surf zone. They make you sit in the surf zone and you're freezing for hours. It seems like hours. And it's just miserable, and that is a really miserable thing to do. And I remember being in those situations, just saying to myself, you know what, I'm just going to count 5 waves. That was my horizon at the time. Sometimes my horizon was make it to the next meal. Sometimes my horizon was get to the end of this berm, right? But it's constantly modulating, and it's because I'm, as a human, as an individual, I'm constantly trying to pick what's that perfect distance or size is, so that I manage that dopamine effectively. How do we do this? We just have to do it through experimentation. We can pick a goal, and if it feels like you're starting to run out of steam, pick a smaller goal. Shorten it. If you pick a goal and it's like, oh man, that was easy, then you have to increase the goal. But you start getting good at it. This part of the mastery process is you start to understand and pick horizons quite automatically, and then you're adjusting horizons in those moments too. I still to this day adjust my horizons sometimes. I run hills. There's a big hill here in Virginia Beach. I go and I put a weight vest on and I sprint up and down a few times just to get my conditioning in. And I've sometimes been on the hill. It's like, no, I'm gonna, because it sucks every time you do it. But I remember I was saying to myself, I'm gonna go 10 steps. And I realized, actually, wait, 10 steps is not enough. I have to focus on the top of the hill sometimes, or sometimes I focus. So you have to have the ability to modulate in there, and that's the idea of dopamine and managing that dopamine system.
Man, that's so good. My brain is just going because I'm thinking of examples with clients. One of the biggest challenges that leaders, especially entrepreneurs, face is when their momentum just comes to a sudden stop.
Yeah.
A big competitor comes into the marketplace, they're taking market share. You are rising to the top and then your feet get cut out from under you. You feel like you're never going to recover. How are we ever going to get back to where we are? The best way, which is what you're saying, to get momentum back is slowly.
Yeah.
You feel like you're literally starting a train,
Yeah.
but that's really what happens is you're not celebrating touchdowns, you're celebrating an advanced yard.
Yes.
That you're making. And I'm literally laughing inside because me and my wife were at the track recently, and before we do a couple warm-up laps, and I ask her, like, what's the goal? Like, we got to set a goal. Why? Because I need a dopamine hit.
Yeah.
And she's like, we're not setting goals. We're just going to go until we don't feel like it anymore. I'm like,
Right.
Absolutely not. we need something.
So you bring up a great example, which is actually very important for people to understand, is that because those horizons are so subjective, you can't necessarily set a horizon for another human being. They have a different level, right? So whereas you might need a goal of, hey, we're going to do my first goal, we're going to do 10 laps, but I'm going to go lap by lap. Your wife might be like, okay, for me, it's 10 laps. There's no,
That was the conversation.
Yeah, so we have to be cognizant of the fact that everybody's horizons are different, and we have to set our own. And especially when we're in teams, business or otherwise, recognize that as a team, you're going to have, if you have a project, there are going to be people on the team who are setting different horizons. They're going to be setting some subjective horizons for what they got going on. As a team, you can set some horizons for sure, but these horizons are quite subjective, and you have to be cognizant of that.
Man, it's so funny, but so true.
Yeah.
Because when I said, why don't you want to set a goal? She was like, because if we set a goal and it starts thundering and raining and trees are flying, you're going to still be running around the track. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to set goals with you. So her horizon needed to be a lot different than mine in that moment.
Yeah. Her horizon was if a thunderstorm starts, maybe. Then she'll reassess and see what else she wants to do.
Exactly. Yeah. Hey, talk to us about I am statements.
Yeah.
This is very practical and super, super powerful. You put a significant emphasis on this.
Yes.
Why are identities so crucial to determining actions under pressure?
Well, so because we have, even though there's the neurology of operating under pressure and uncertainty, which we just talked about, that's very human. Everybody has this. We're all the same when it comes to our neurology. There are factors in our systems that are not the same. They're very unique to us. Attributes is one of those. The objectives we hold are one of those, but identity is a huge one as well. The identities we carry, so I always kind of say that the two most powerful words in the human language are I am, because everything you put after those words begins to drive your behavior towards a certain identity. It's what you identify as. But as humans, we have to recognize that we actually collect identities. We collect I ams throughout our whole life. They can be benign all the way to very, very important and serious. I went to this high school. I'm a lacrosse player. I'm a Navy SEAL. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm a motorcycle enthusiast. I'm a Metallica fan. Okay, whatever those are, every one of those I am statements carries with them some rules and conditions and biases that define behavior inside that identity. These behaviors are driving performance for us all the time. And when we are in uncertainty, challenge, and stress, what happens is we are going to behave towards those identities that we prioritize the highest in that moment. Okay, so when I was overseas in Iraq or Afghanistan, my most important identity was Navy SEAL, obviously. Okay, my second one was husband, father. Sometimes I will say that we'd be over on a mission and doing something, and something would happen, and my husband, father identity would be prioritized because we'd maybe have to take care of some civilians or whatever, and that's a very natural shift. But at home, obviously, I tried to make my identity husband and father first. But all this to say, we have to begin being cognizant of the identities that we carry. Because it's shaping our behavior, both consciously and unconsciously. and understanding which identities will actually support us the best in uncertainty. Because sometimes in uncertainty, my Navy SEAL identity might not be the best one I want to lean upon. It might be my husband, father. It might be my Metallica fan one. Who knows? But it's the cognizance that really helps people operate more effectively.
I think you might be onto something here as it relates to work-life balance as well.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, who you are in the moment, because you are many things.
Yes.
And who, most importantly, is who are you saying you are in that moment?
Yeah.
I think is a game changer. You know, as we kind of wrap up through some of this conversation, Rich, this is a leadership podcast. We're talking to leaders. We're talking to entrepreneurs. I think we've talked to the leader, the individual, but I want to ask you the question to the leader that's listening, that's trying to help bring their teams through change, bring their teams through uncertainty, bring their teams through new software launches, new competitors that are coming into the market, all the things that these listeners are challenged with. How can leaders create team identities that can withstand high pressure situations? Yeah. How do we reproduce this into the masses?
Yeah, in terms of teaming, we have to understand that this is a culture thing. Culture is really the engine that drives teams, and we can in fact affect our culture consciously and positively by creating I am statements for that culture. Right? If we say, okay, as part of this team, the team identity means I am this, I am that, and you start to literally set and chart and jot down behaviors that define what it means to be part of this identity. The Girl Scouts do this beautifully. They have a Girl Scout code, right? And whenever a Girl Scout becomes a Girl Scout, they memorize this code. It comes with a series of statements that define what it means and what the behavior of a Girl Scout is. And it's known. I mean, there's no debate. Everybody knows what it means behaviorally to be a Girl Scout. If you're a Girl Scout, teams can do this too, and they can do this quite deliberately. And one of the things I did with a team when I was commanding officer was we created a series of I am statements that defined what it meant to be part of that command. You know, instead of a command philosophy, it was I am this, I am that, and that series of statements allowed for everybody to be aligned on the behaviors that drive and define what it means to be part of that identity. And we can do this if we don't do this deliberately as leaders. Just rest assured, it will happen. Okay, a culture will be created, an identity will be created. You may not like what's created unconsciously because it's done consciously or unconsciously. The idea is take conscious control of it and create that, and have everybody have a say in it.
Man, that's good. I like and everybody have a say in it.
Yeah.
Because getting people involved at the point of origin gets buy-in.
Yes, that's
and
right.
I remember the Soldier's Creed. Like we had to memorize it, but then we internalized it.
Yeah.
And it became part of the mission. It became part of the culture. If there's one thing from the book, which this might be the hardest question I've asked you yet, I guess. If there's one thing that the listener should or you would recommend that they implement from the book, like if you had to narrow it, like don't miss this one thing,
yeah,
what would you recommend that they start with?
Get good at moving horizons. Yeah, get good at moving horizons. And the book will outline ways you can do that and some techniques you can use to make sure you're managing your autonomic arousal so that you can do this. But moving horizons and setting DPOs is the most important thing. And in the book, I outline exactly how you can do that. And you can do it deliberately and repeatedly in very intense environments. But that's the number one thing. The other stuff is very important to understand your own behavior. But if you're getting good at moving horizons, what you're doing is you're re-engaging your frontal lobe, your conscious mind, which starts to take a back seat, by the way, when our autonomic arousal goes up. What we're doing is we're stemming that, and we're bringing our frontal lobe back online. We're creating conscious thinking, conscious decision making, which means now you can start working out all the rest of the stuff as well.
So good. You're always, man, I feel like we could talk all day, but man, Rich, it's always a pleasure. I can't wait to your next book already. Like we can't go 4 years again. But
yeah, no, we won't. I have to work it out, but I don't have any ideas yet. But it'll come soon. So
there we go. Well, man, always a pleasure. The knowledge, the wisdom that you bring, it's truly a gift to the world. And just greatly appreciate you investing time with me, with our listeners today, and being a part of the Champion Forum podcast once again.
Thanks, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to staying in touch. So thank you.
No doubt. Well, hey, everyone, go pick up a copy of Masters of Uncertainty. If you want to contact Rich, explore his content, I highly recommend it. Make sure that you go get the show notes from this episode and every episode. You can go get those at jeffhancher.com. Sign up at the bottom of the homepage. We're going to have links to Rich's new book, his website, all the ways to contact him as well, and break down some of the nuggets from each and every episode. So listen, thanks for joining again today. Until next week, continue the journey to master uncertainty and keep turning that pressure into potential.
The Champion Forum Podcast with Jeff Hancher. Lead, inspire, win.